Yes, thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone from our side, from the ReMO COST Action side. I'm very glad to see that so many of you are interested in this topic. I also want to introduce very quickly myself. I'm the chair of the Action, the Research on Mental Health Cost Action. We have Stephanie here, who's a vice chair of our Action, and she's the mastermind behind the Ambassador School, what we are running and what she's going to talk about. I would also like to welcome Maya, who is a very active member of our policy working group and leading the policy briefs, brief actions, and this is what she's going to talk about soon. And last but not least, welcome Stefan, who is leading the institutional level working group and leading a massive data collection effort on researcher well-being, together with other Action participants. So let me quickly share my screen. There it is. I hope it's visible. Yes, perfect. So the title of our action is Researcher Mental Wellbeing, and basically what we see in the past, or what we have seen in the past, is that in our academic environments, there's a very high levels of perceived mental well-being problems. And this is something what you can probably feel in your everyday work as well. Since every third person, around 30 to 42% of academic employees are at risk of having some sort of psychiatric disorder or some sort of mental health problem, which is an alarming number. But how does this look like in reality? I was conducting a workshop back in 2021 with postdocs and PhD students in Hungary, and I noted down a few quotes from this community. What did mental well-being problems, mental health problems meant for them? And I would like to read out a few of these. The first one says, I feel guilty and anxious all the time because I feel like I'm not doing my work well enough. The second one, I constantly feel guilty when I'm not only doing research. I feel that after the PhD, I will have almost no knowledge of anything that is useful in the job market. Even my extended family or close circle of friends fail to recognize the value of research work. I think this is a really sad one. My working hours are not flexible. In the evening, I put the children to bed and I have time for my intellectual tasks. But then I either fall asleep or I can manage them. But then after 2-3 hours of sleep, the clock is already ringing because at 8 a.m. I have to be ready in my work uniform at the institute. It's very soul-crushing. As a woman, I never feel ready to have children because of the constant inflow of new tasks, projects, and responsibilities. And I'm getting older and afraid of running out of time. It's a super frustration. There is no differentiation on the basis of results performance, which is not a motivating environment. The best colleagues and role models leave the field and are often not replaced by the outstanding ones. So probably from all these quotes, you may see that actually we are facing here a systematic problem. And still, surprisingly, the awareness, both on personal, institutional, and national levels, is still limited. We are still not talking enough about mental well-being in academia and the mental health crisis we have. So we, in our action, we strongly believe that we need to act now, and we have to embrace bottom-up initiatives in order to actually make our situation better and learn and understand more about this mental well-being crisis. So that's why we started our COST Action, what we call the Researcher Mental Health Observatory. As you may see from the action identifier, we got this grant in 2019. We started working in 2020, so we still have about a year to go. So we already have some nice results, what we will report today. Altogether, I believe our action is relatively big. We have 42 countries, around 250 researchers represented in this network. The network is quite active in terms of activities. And we have researchers from all career stages, from many organizations which are affiliated to research, universities, research organizations, but also student union and similar organizations in Europe. One important output, what we came up with after the first year of the project, is called the Researcher Mental Health and Wellbeing Manifesto. This is our flagship document, and basically in this document we summarize what are the key action points of our COST Action, what needs to be done in order to create a well-working research environment, but it also gives recommendations to policymakers, institutions, and researchers alike. So we have these recommendations on 3 levels. First is that we are calling for transforming the research ecosystem to benefit mental health and well-being. What does that mean? On a policy high level, we want to start fostering dialogues around mental well-being. We want to support evidence-based, data-driven policymaking within research. We want to make sure that state-of-the-art evidence and tools are disseminated well throughout Europe. And we also believe that we need to put some efforts on revising the academic reward system. We also have some recommendations for institutions. We call this Fostering and Sustaining Mental Health and Wellbeing by Design, a call for institutional change. Here, we want to draw attention to the recognition of mental health and well-being issues within organizations. Again, try to foster sharing best practices across institutions. We believe we have to look at the research performance assessment and turn it into a fair and personalized process. And last but not least, we think we need to put more effort on supporting grassroots change initiatives within organizations. And last but not least, we are also calling for researcher empowerment. That means when it comes to researchers themselves, we need to follow a person-centered approach when it comes to training and career management and self-development. We need to collect evidence, what works when it comes to this type of intervention. Again, we stress the importance of grassroots initiatives and the importance of peer-to-peer supports in research teams or institutions. So basically, this manifesto and the points of this manifesto are driving our key activities. And this is what we're going to show some 3 major key activities today. But before we get there, I just want to show you very quickly how our action is organized. So similarly to the manifesto, we have organized our working groups on policy level, institutional level, and individual level. So working group 1 is the systematic policy level, focusing on the European research area, and aims at connecting researcher representatives, civil organizations, and policymakers, and focusing on really the high-level systemic issues which are beyond any particular organization or disciplines. Working group 2 focuses on institutional level and addresses mental health within institutions, try to foster evidence-based understanding of what a best practice looks like, and of course sharing institutional experiences also to effect institutional policies. And last but not least, we also have a working group on local actors, which focuses on individuals and try to address individual well-being of researchers. That means we want to link actors that deal with developing and promoting a sustainable and enjoyable research climate. We want to provide the insights about the determinants of sustaining employment and long-term integration within the workplaces, and focus on issues, small interventions such as counseling support or peer-to-peer support, or in the world of Corona, of course, our action was also highly affected was highly affected by the Corona pandemic. We try to arrange some sort of discussion around the importance of online networks and their impact on our well-being. And with this, I would like to close the introduction. So this is what our ReMO COST Action does. And now we will get into some details, what precise actions our community carries out. And let me start with Stefan Moll and the ReMO survey. So Stefan, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Gabor. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
You can, okay, fantastic. Thanks again for joining us today in this webinar about our cost action. I thought I'd share with you a little bit about ongoing work towards putting together the Sustainable Working Conditions in Academia survey. So I'd like to start off showing you a little video, and I hope it is working, that we put together for the dissemination of this survey. That basically speaks for itself, I suppose. What we hope to do with this institutional level survey is to identify which characteristics of institutions and of institutional policies and practices have the strongest impact on research and mental health.
This doesn't work without having proper data. This doesn't work without having proper analysis on that data. And this data is then really the basis of evidence-based decisions on working conditions.
Researchers are requested to do creative work in a very autonomous way. In order to do that, we need to make sure that they feel secure, that they feel part of our community, that they feel that they can share our vision and values, and we need to recognize them.
Cognitive performance decreases if emotional states are not optimal, and the opposite. If an individual experiences positive emotions like motivation, curiosity, feeling engaged with the institution, the performance will increase.
To be able to recruit the brightest, most creative, most innovative minds that we want to perform research and to create innovation, employers will need to pay attention to mental health and well-being.
Through creating a good psychosocial work environment and good mental health, they would be able also to make attractive workplaces.
Institutions should take care of their researchers instead of resisting. Taking a part will be for their benefits.
By taking part in this research can show that they care about the mental well-being of their employees. And this is a first step in trying to do better. And we can always do better where it comes to mental health.
We are all part of the solution. And, you know, if you're not part of creating that healthy solution, then you're exacerbating the problem.
So this is a battle that we tackle together as partners.
Institutions should participate because institutions are made by people, for people, and if they care, and we trust that they care, then this is a way of taking care of us.
We are listening to you,
And this is the first step towards making the situation better.
Right, let me just quickly navigate back to my presentation. Can someone please confirm that you can see my presentation?
Yes, we see it.
Yes, thanks. I got it. No, that's not what I want. Okay, as to this survey, basically within the cost action, we decided very early on to put together a survey special interest group to basically collect data on the state of research on mental health across the member countries. And I think this effort has really demonstrated, to me at least, the power of cost actions in facilitating research, in the sense that back in 2022, we put out a call within the network for volunteers to help us put together this survey. Basically, we requested in that announcement people's investment of 8 hours a month for the period of a year to help us put together this survey. And we expected to get something like 4 or 5 responses, but an overwhelming 60 people said that they would be willing to invest this amount of time in helping us launch this survey. So ever since that time, I've been honored together with Jana Lusser of TU Graz to be kind of coordinating this survey special interest group in putting together what we aim to be the largest ever benchmark on mental health in European academia. And the idea is that we'll be launching this survey as of September 1st, 2023. So what are the specific objectives of this survey? Well, first off, we're simply interested in engaging the state of research and mental health across institutions and countries. So we sort of set that for ourselves as a bronze goal, if you will. But on top of that, we also want to gain insight into what it is that institutions are and are not doing there when it comes to research on mental health. And the reason for this is that it is all too easy there where an individual researcher faces mental health issues to sort of blame the victim and also to try to seek solutions at the individual level. So if you have a burnout, maybe you should follow a time management training, or maybe you should be more mindful, or what have you not. And I think oftentimes the role of the institutional context in preventing or bringing about mental health issues is not sufficiently acknowledged. Basically, the aim of this survey then is to see whether we can identify contextual antecedents of research on mental health and examine which of those contextual antecedents are most strongly related to research on mental health. So there you can think of things like precarity, supervision, and so forth, having an impact on the individual level mental health of PhD researchers, professors, and so on. So this being a survey, we are somewhat limited in causal inference. So yes, we may be able to identify those types of relationships where people who face greater precarity at work are more likely to report mental health issues. But insofar as we do, we already foresee that we'll probably need to conduct follow-up research using quasi-experimental or experimental design in which we actually establish causal relationships between those antecedents and research on mental health. And with that, then we can start moving towards evidence-based interventions that might actually improve the state of affairs. So this study is sort of unique, I think, in that it employs what is known as a multi-level design. So we are interested in examining individual researchers who are nested within faculties or departments, that are nested within universities, that are nested in countries. And by sort of sampling all of these levels, and assessing different constructs that reside at each of these levels, will we be able to attribute researcher mental health to those levels. So at the end of the study, we hope to be able to make statements like 15% of the variability in mental health of individual researchers actually resides at the country level, or 20% of the variability in mental health that individual researchers report resides at the university level, and so forth. And by aggregating data across these levels, can we actually gain insight into whether it is truly the university or the institutional context, if you will, that is making people ill. The problem with a lot of survey research is that all data are collected from the individuals, and there where an individual reports poor mental health and also terrible supervision, we cannot really tell whether maybe that person is just prone to complaining about everything, or whether there is indeed a relationship between these variables. So by actually aggregating data to these different levels, will we be able to examine the impact of, for instance, investment in academia at the country level on individual researcher mental health. Believe it or not, there is also something that is known as the World Database of Happiness. And we're also interested in examining whether country differences in happiness might be relatable to individual level mental health. So to organize ourselves, we've put together a lot of work packages. In the interest of time, I'll just go through this very, very quickly. So Janne Lasser and myself, here with much shorter hair than I have now, are basically leading work package 1, which is project management. Ivana and Mais are leading work package 2, which had to do with the development of hypotheses pertaining to the antecedents of researcher mental health at all those levels I spoke of earlier. Igor and Marit were charged with actually translating those hypotheses into validated skills for the assessment of all those antecedents of mental health and mental health itself. And there we had to deal with some very difficult questions pertaining to survey length. So clearly, there's a lot that we want to ask of the research that we aim to approach, but there are certain limits. So we try to restrain or contain the survey within something like 15 minutes or so. So there we had to answer questions like, how many of the questions on the survey do we want to devote to assessing mental health, and how many of the questions on the survey do we want to devote to assessing the various antecedents. And all in all, that resulted in a survey instrument that has now been translated into 5 languages. Inga and Matthias are leading the dissemination work package. So this is work that largely lies in front of us, where we aim to push this survey across the 42 countries of the COST Action and into the institutions and ultimately to the individual researchers. Ultimately, we hope to obtain data from, well, I think we roughly set a ballpark goal for ourselves of some 50,000 individual researchers across all these countries. Dara is charged with sort of giving back to people who participate in the survey. So he is working on basically the final page of the survey, where where the survey actually makes people aware of mental health issues that they may be experiencing. We want to provide some resources and perhaps even try to put or ask people whether they want to join groups of people who are facing similar conditions at work as they are. For instance, we could put together a group of people who are facing poor supervision, and maybe these people, by talking with one another, can move towards some sort of resolution. Finally, Mingming Chu and Sophia Paige are already thinking about how to actually crunch these data. We'll be conducting so-called multi-level analyses, and there's all sorts of challenges that await us there. Where do we stand currently? Well, basically the survey is done. We've translated it into English, French, German, Spanish, and Italian. We chose those languages because they are spoken by most people within the 42 countries of the COST Action. Within this work, we are striving to abide by open science principles. So we actually hope to pre-register the study prior to data collection, and ultimately the data that we collect will also be published for other researchers to benefit from. The survey will be disseminated, so that's still an open task, and as said, as of September 2023 through March 2024 do we hope to collect it. How do we foresee doing this? Well, we've put in place some 40 plus country coordinators or teams of country coordinators who are charged with disseminating the survey locally, and we're also trying to partner up with unions, individual institutions, and indeed Elsevier, who's also promised to help us with the dissemination of this survey through their social media channels and author websites. So that's it for me. Insofar as you have any questions, or if you want to get involved, this is an open project. So basically anyone with an interest in contributing is welcome to be part of this. Please do get in touch with me at the email address that is listed here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And with that, you already answered a question what is in the chat. If Shayla was asking if she can be part of the project. So there's an email. Please get in touch with her. Thanks a lot. And now the next speaker is Stephanie. Stephanie, please go ahead. I see your slides, but I can't hear you. Now I can hear you.
Yes, it's better that way, right? So hello, everybody. Thank you for still being here with us. As Gabor said, I'm Stephanie Gauthier. I'm the vice chair of the action, and I am coordinating, organizing the ambassador program that we have in ReMO. What you can see on the slide is actually a picture that was made by somebody we had on the virtual mobility grant, and I think it represents quite nicely the spirit, let's say, of the ambassador program, in the sense that you can see people obviously coming from lots of different backgrounds and culture, trying to, come together to be a little bit at peace. And the ambassador program actually brings together a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds. So we've set up the program thinking that we needed to figure out a way to enable people who want to help and want to do their bits to actually come and do it. The people who want to do their bits are not necessarily people in psychology. You saw maybe on the slide, I'm for information systems, and Gabor is the same. It can be people from very different academic, let's say, backgrounds. So we have PhDs. The first year, we almost had no postdocs who actually applied to come to our ambassador school. But we also have a lot of permanent faculty and non-academics, people who've already taken action, people who've never done anything for mental health, and who come from very diverse places. In the ambassador school, what we offer them is actually a place to come together, to get to know one another, but also to get trained on many different topics, which can be related directly to mental health, sometimes are more related, let's say, to the context of what we hope to inspire people to do. But I'll show you that a bit more in detail in a minute. So since 2022, we had overall 180 participants, many of them online, fewer people actually coming face to face, but people who still keep active together. And this year we were very happy to have people coming from South Africa, We also had people following us online from Colombia, and we had participants who are currently doing their PhDs in Europe, but are planning on going back to Asia. So we actually hope to also have the word spread in diverse territories. We select people to participate in the Ambassador School based, let's say, on those different criteria, if you want, that I put on the slide. So for us, national diversity is important because we want to have a lot of very local action. And the role of the ambassadors is actually to also help us to know quite in detail what's going on in their countries, what's going on in their institution, and what are the problems over there. So this was something very important. It's also about, as I said, different, let's say, academic levels of careers or non-academic careers, in order to learn from one another how we can actually help to change things within an organization and continue, let's say, to foster conversations. I consider it as a bit of a hive. And the first thing that inspires us is the manifesto that Gabor actually mentioned. Very important for us because in the manifesto, we indeed have some activities that we want to carry out. And these activities, they can inspire people who know there is a problem, but they're not sure exactly where to start or what to do. So we actually also help them to try to see their way and their path. So that's a bit where we go. But the Ambassador School is mostly meant to give people the means to do activities bottom up. So that was also, you know, the spirit that Gabor was mentioning to you in his presentation. So we want to enable people to do what it is that they want. So I've just put a couple of examples of actions that we've had from ambassadors from the previous year, but also this year. So first you can see Ana Muro. She's a doctor professor in psychology. She had already set up a program that's called the Third Health, where she trains actually doctoral students on mental health. And she came to be an ambassador in the first year when we ran the program. And now she's actually actively disseminating and also trying to, let's say, take our program to maybe yet another level. We also have from Slovenia, Matija Ersa, who has actually been able to team up with Matija Zalar, who we had invited to be a trainer. And together they're trying to set up mental health groups in Slovenia, but also trying to do things to lower the price of, you know, how much they have to pay when they need to go to the therapist and all these things through their institutions. So it's very practical action, but that can really change what's going on in people's lives. And Simone Lackner has become very active in dissemination as well, trying to target different communities, different disciplines to make sure that the word on mental health is being heard. We have fewer but quite interesting activities related to policy. So we have an ambassador from Croatia who's been setting up meetings with the ministries. And we have a lot of people who at least report some form of changing practices. So for us, it's already the sign that this system seems to be working as far as it enables people to go and do their bits, as I said. In order to enable them to do that, we have a couple of things that we've put together. The first one is train them on the evidence hub. So Gabor was mentioning we want to gather evidence. So we have something there. So we try to bring everybody on par. We train them on mentoring, on practicing mental health. We also have Stefan, who helps us to think about what's the survey and also what's the role of evidence in our activities on mental health. And we also do a bit related to policy and getting national overviews, but that's something that Maya is going to explain to you a little bit more. We try not to leave it there. So it's not only about, you know, people coming for a couple of days or a week of training. We also try to provide them some form of toolkit that they can use before, after the event to try to actually make their action plans. And you can also find that on the Zenodo, because it's really about that and preparing people to take action. It's also a great way for us, I think, to start to organize sustainability, because it's a great tool to make people actually talk to one another and realize their interests and what they want to do and what they want to change. So we have a couple of Erasmus Plus proposals in the way, some PhD that are bilateral collaborations. We've also had at least 2 STSMs, but I suppose there is more coming up, and people involved heavily in the survey SIG that Stefan has presented. So the Ambassador School, for me, it's maybe not exactly a research-driven, let's say, activity as the survey we've just presented, but it's a way to stimulate people to do research. And I think it's also a way for us to actually do what we preach. So we do a lot of exercises together, a lot of networking together, just, you know, in the hope of one day coming to that beautiful picture of having diverse groups of people all over Europe and maybe even a little bit beyond, try to work together in a more respectful environment.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. And now over to Maya, and I just would like to remind you that if you have questions about all what you have heard so far, don't forget to put it into the Q&A section. After Maya's presentation, we will open the floor and we will try to answer your questions, if you have any, of course. Maya, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gabor. Thanks, dear colleague Stephanie, Stefan. So I'll start with this image of a team of a group of people rowing in the middle of the sea, as a way to highlight that the conditions, the suffering in relation to mental health and well-being is worrying nowadays. And it's heartening and gives hope to realize that the culture is slowly changing by removing the individual burden to kind of psychosocial factors, systemic factors. And we hope to have data coming up to support that. And I'm Maya. I'm connecting today from Spain, where I work as a researcher in neuroscience and consultant in open science and community building. As you see, I'm not coming from a policy background or healthcare or psychology background, but I'm willing to contribute to the change, to be a part of solution. So we are running this project on drafting policy briefs for different countries of ReMO Action on mental health of researchers across Europe. We are doing this together with the Working Group 1, with the chair Janet Metcalfe, with great support from Grant Manager Brian Cahill, my colleagues here today, and many members of ReMO community. And when we started the project and started all meetings and discussions, the image that comes to mind when we speak about mental health and the factors in all different countries is like trying to construct an enormous puzzle of many pieces, because we all come from different contexts, cultural, national backgrounds. And yeah, so lived experiences are quite different and generations are different. And to construct the overview of this mapping, how the mental health of researchers in different countries, we can compare it as, coming to the metaphor of the puzzle, you can think of, you will need to start from the borders or from elements that look familiar to you and easily recognizable. So when we started consulting with the community, with the working group, what has to be in that document? No, what do we need to know when we speak to someone in policy or in the society to describe? And we came up with a list of topics that has to be in that document. So it's quite comprehensive. I'm listing it on this on this slide. So for example, we have to start with saying what is urgent in the country or at the European level, what is currently in the news. For example, now we can mention that European Commission just issued a statement on comprehensive mental health approach. We need to provide the evidence that is there already about mental health status in academia through surveys, but sometimes we don't have it yet in some countries. So some anecdotal evidence would also be important. We would like to identify and list the important stakeholders at the national level or at the level of representation of international organizations. List the mental health and support services in the system, in the country, and maybe try to find the barriers that exist in accessing these systems. Like Stephanie was mentioning, the high cost of accessing the support. And last and not least is to mention relation to how academic research system is built, how the career for researcher is structured, because there are quite some differences between different countries. Describe the situation with funding, and of course, list the legislation and policies. You can take a look at our template, but please remember it's something we are still working on, and if you have some suggestions, please feel free to add them. And to show you our vision is also to see these documents, these policy briefs, not only as a deliverable, as a comprehensive document that will describe the summary, the background situation of mental health of researchers, but also remember that it's about relationships between people, about engaging the community, bringing together participants, stakeholders. And last but not the least is capacity building, because it's really important for researchers to understand that the policy is not something that is outside of research or our everyday life. And it's really important for early career researchers to get engaged with this, because changes sometimes are really slow. And it's important to start early to be able to be a part of the solution and not the problem. So at the practical level, we launched a call in the ReMO community for volunteers who wanted to contribute, who wanted to lead the work in their countries. And this colored map of European countries cost members show you at the stage of the readiness of this background summary on mental health. In yellow, you can see countries with whom we have volunteers and did a one-to-one or a team onboarding. And in orange, we can see countries that already started working. And in violet, we have ongoing work, means that is really very few things are missing, some gaps. And in blue, we have a template quite full, quite ready, and is in editing to share for consultations with the wider community. And the next slides, I will show you the screenshots of these ready templates for you to appreciate. And I really would like to highlight the importance of the ambassador training school, because it helped not only to give tools how to work on such things, but also to create a feeling of community, of feeling willing to work together and continue applying the skills and willingness to do this advocacy work and something that will have tangible results. And of course, management committee members are quite active in this, but also working group members who are just continuing to join the action. And actually the map has to be updated because we had a conference last week and many people expressed wish to volunteer for this. And not last but not least, external stakeholders. For example, Marie Curie Alumni Association is willing to join this project as well. As I mentioned, we have 2 reports in editing. The background brief for Finland that was wonderfully led by Melina Arnikoivu, and background brief for Romania led by Claudia Jacob. And I'd really like to highlight the contributions of these individuals who also created small teams, and to Amil, who is a virtual mobility grantee for designing the graphics for the action. So to make sure that these reports look appealing and consistent. So this slide shows you just the screenshots of different pages. For example, as I was mentioning what is in the news, in the landscape related to mental health, researchers in Finland. And we try to have all the references in place, or another screenshot on support and service systems. For example, mentioning the major stakeholder advocate for mental health in Finland, which is Mieli Association. So paraphrasing the proverb, if you want to go far, go together. I'd also like to add, be creative and flexible and see this process as quite agile in the sense we might be willing to build a car, but we also want to have value on some other stages of development of this project, of this product, like a bicycle or motorcycle on the skate. And like to give you an example, for example, already some versions of this document were useful as a sort of toolkit for ReMO ambassadors to help them to communicate with the stakeholders in their country. Or for example, Stefan was mentioning the survey is now currently in a dissemination phase, and also the information that we gathered was quite helpful in some occasions. And of course, the last but not least is the information and recommendation for policymakers. We've been speaking about this quite actively. Even only in this year, we already presented it at the Maria Lume Association conference. Janet spoke about it during ReMO Ambassador training, and Stephanie, of course. And last week we held a workshop at the ReMO conference, and these photos show you how excited were the teams. We split the participants according to the teams of the countries where they come from, and put them to brainstorm the stakeholders in their context, grouping them into allies, helpers, and targets whom they want to influence. And our ambassador, Simone, she, as Stephanie was mentioning, she also shared her experience in leading the team work in Portugal. So what we want to highlight, it's never work done on your own, alone. It's always a team, collaborative effort. So I wonder if you have any questions or you would like to join us and add this special puzzle piece in our whole picture. Just please drop me a line and we can have a chat. And that was my last slide, and I'm happy to close sharing.
Yes, thank you very much. And before we close, quickly, I want to say a few words before we get into the questions. Like, after all this, what can we do together? And first of all, get on the barricades. Like, seriously, let's start discussing mental health and mental well-being in our institutions, in our circles, because I think we believe we need this type of discussions, and start thinking about what can you do in your local environment. Then, of course, as we said, and I guess you know how cost actions work. Just join our activities. There are ample of opportunities here what you can join and work together with our community, the policy briefs, the survey. We have webinars. We are writing. We have book chapter groups who are writing papers and book chapters about this issue. When it comes to webinars, I just want to make one advertisement that soon, on the 28th of June at 3 o'clock CET, we are organizing a webinar on research integrity as a part of a wider research culture, where the head of the German research ombudsman will be our guest. We have regular webinars at least once per month. We have something exciting on the show, and you can watch all the past webinars on YouTube. Also, in 2 weeks, we organize a conference or a small workshop in Brussels together with another European project, Oscar, which is actually a spin-off of the ReMO community. Feel free to drop by either person by person in Brussels. I think we still have some travel grants available if you want to come. And in this event, we are going to discuss how to use AI in doctoral education to enhance mental health and career management skills in academia. I think it's a really exciting topic. So if you feel like joining, you are more than welcome to do that. And with this, I would like to talk, and I think close, and I would like to open it up for questions if you have any. Thank you very much on behalf of our team.
Is there any like more wider background research on this topic yet, or it's only in a smaller country levels, or different topics? Can you please elaborate a bit on that? And also, like I would like to ask, is there some topics? I know that Gabor, you sent in the first presentation, you had some quotes on the different issues that the academics are facing. But are there some main topics that you already see that are huge problems within the academia?
Stefan, go first.
All right. Yes. We are indeed in the process already of carrying out some research studies. There's a lot going on within the cost action, not only in submitting future projects. So for instance, we're interested in working towards an institutional mental health certification, which is one topic that's on the table, but we're also in the process of conducting various studies. An example is a study that we currently have under peer review that was a survey study in Montenegro, which was basically a pilot towards the much larger survey effort. And what we focused on there is the stresses that individual researchers are under in trying to meet tenure and promotions criteria. So basically, we ask people, like, to what extent have you fulfilled the obligations that you need to fulfill to be able to make promotion. And yeah, interestingly, there we do find that is a major stressor, particularly as the time of the tenure and promotions evaluation is coming closer. Do we find that people who've not fulfilled their obligations are suffering in terms, not only in terms of stress, but also anxiety and symptoms of depression. So that's work that's sort of currently underway.
Just a few extensions. So Brian already added a link to the Q&A section about what we call the evidence hub. So we have on Zotero, we have a collection of papers, collection of interventions, not only scientific papers, but practical papers as well, covering a number of different issues when it comes to mental well-being and mental health. And you ask, what are the most typical ones? So when we have our discussions, usually supervision comes out, number one. How we get along with each other at the workplace, how supervisors and supervisees exchange ideas. Simply, how do they talk to each other? What is the relationship of supervisor and supervisee? That has a major impact on how we feel, but also how successful we are when it comes to our work. Then we mentioned the academic reward system. We can mention something like the loneliness of research work, that oftentimes researchers need to work in isolation, closed down in labs. Like my wife, for instance, a biophysicist, had to do her work in basically a sealed room, in a dark room where even the air was exchanged. And the protocols sometimes take 15 to 20 hours, and you can't stop what you were doing. And that takes its toll as well. So there are a lot of issues. I really suggest you to look at the Zotero library for more information.
Okay, thank you. There was a question on the investigating the role space plays in scholars' way of working. Is there any question on your survey related to the spaces they use? I think you mentioned already a bit of that. Stephanie, you have one of the ambassadors working on this question. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, we have an ambassador who basically has a background in architecture and architectural studies, and he's working on the role of space in well-being in the workplace. And I think one of the variables is also like, you know, how green the space is around you. So he's trying to look at these things. So hopefully soon we'll have some results that we can also draw from. But it's definitely a good question from Chiara. I think that the environment is the people, is the culture, and that's something that we are really trying to get to change. But there's also the physical environment with all these constraints that, you know, make us feel more, you know, at risk than others.
Thank you. I think we are a bit running out of time. So I would like to, at this point, thank all the speakers and all the participants for joining us today to discuss this important topic.